Hello and welcome to the Three Peaks podcast, where we take a break from the hike of life and appreciate the views. Today, we have a very special guest, Jake Hunsaker. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
Go ahead.
Sorry. We're going to hand it over to you to tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, and what are some of your hobbies.
Awesome. Well, gosh, I guess to tell you about who I am and kind of what made me into the person by the way, none of us are who we're going to be. You know, we're always all changing. We're always all growing. But I'll tell you how I got to here. So I'm one of 11 kids. That's a very big family growing up. We had a 3-bedroom house. And so we had my 6 sisters in one room, 5 brothers in one room. And then my 2 parents always took the smallest room. And I grew up in northern Utah in a farming community. So growing up, we didn't have much money, as a family because of the size of the family and things like that. So we pretty much had to pay for, starting in 7th grade, we paid for our own school clothes, and we bought our own, if we wanted a new scooter or something like that, we would buy that from our own money. So my first jobs were really in junior high because I had to earn that money, and it was milking cows and picking sweet corn were the jobs around town where I came from. And so I grew up really hating milking cows, thinking that was probably the worst job I was ever going to have, even though I was grateful to have it. And that's probably remained the worst job I've had until I got into politics. And politics really gives milking cows a run for its money, probably.
Yeah.
But so I grew up in that farming community, big family, had a great, really, I would say an all-American childhood. We, climbed trees and we played ball out in the back pasture and had a lot of free time, had time to be kids and enjoy life. And my dad worked for the Boy Scouts. And so we spent a lot of summers up at scout camp in the mountains, canoeing and swimming and hiking. And it was just the best way to grow up. Yeah. And let's see, since then I went down to business school down at BYU and studied business management. And I've spent about the last decade in what we call the private sector, pretty much in business. Spent a little bit of time working in retail at Payless Shoe Source. Do you guys remember Payless Shoe Source, or is that?
Yeah, we actually bought a couple of pair of shoes there, way back.
Yeah. So they went bankrupt, but it wasn't because of me. So I spent about a year, and they were headquartered out in Kansas. So I moved to Kansas. And that's in the retail industry. Really fascinating experience. Spent the next 4 years at Goldman Sachs here in Salt Lake. And that's a Wall Street bank. And so it was very different from kind of the shoe industry. And then ever since then, spent the last few years at Google doing operations management in the tech industry. So retail, to finance, to tech has given me a really kind of broad range of professional experiences. And now I'm running for Congress in District 4 in Utah. It's where I live here in Riverton. And that's right across the freeway. So you're not in my district, but politics is something I've always cared a lot about. The people who make the rules that all of us have to play by every day, and the people who uphold the promise of what I would say is the greatest promise a country's ever been able to provide for its citizens. The promise of an American dream and opportunity and growth and new pathways and all of those things I care really deeply about. And that's why I got into politics, because I think that we've got to have people who uphold that for a new generation. And I'm pretty young. I'm just in my early 30s, but I really believe we've got to make some changes if we're going to give, people in your generation the same opportunities that we were given. Right. And so that's why I'm doing politics right now. That was really long-winded. How's that? Oh, I didn't even talk about any hobbies or anything. I love music. I'm a singer. I was in the Tabernacle Choir for a while in Salt Lake. In college, I was in my college's a cappella group, Vocal Point. Oh. I don't know if you've heard of that down at BYU. And we went and did some reality TV on NBC in California. It was really cool. It was a lot of fun. So
cool.
Yeah. And being in a career of politics, and one question I wanted to ask you is, a lot of people are young and they consider a politics a downside to like a conversation or something, but why should people like take into consideration that politics plays a part in their everyday life?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're right. Politics is a real downer. It's like all of us have been at a Thanksgiving dinner where it turns to politics and we're like, here we go again. By the end, we're like throwing like, pumpkin pie at each other.
Yeah.
And that's really unfortunate to me because I think the whole reason that politics exists for all of us to talk about is because we live in a country that gave us the freedom to all have differing opinions and to think about things differently. And that's a key ingredient, I think, that's been missing pretty much almost entirely lately, is the idea that, part of a political conversation is just as much listening as it is talking. And being Republican doesn't mean I can't listen to a Democrat, or being a Democrat doesn't mean that Republicans are always wrong. There's so much common ground and so many solutions that all of us can actively work on finding if we just stop talking for a little bit and learn to value other people's perspectives. And that's the piece that makes politics so gross right now. It's because I think we don't really do that very well. And it's really coming at the expense of actual progress for people like you and me who just want a functional country. And so I think that's really sad. It's honestly one of the big reasons I got into politics, because I just don't think that's the right way to do it. And I want to be able to go to Thanksgiving dinner and talk about fascinating political ideas without throwing pumpkin pie. And so I think it's doable. I always use the word shiny versus unshiny. There's this unshiny part of politics that doesn't get much attention. And it's because it's not sensational. It doesn't get you on the national news networks. It doesn't get you the clicks and the headlines and all of those things. But that's the part where the common ground is found, not in kind of the cheap shots and the cheap headlines and stuff that are so divisive, that take up a lot of what we see in the news and a lot of the politicians that we put back in Washington.
And I've learned this a while ago, but when it comes to like when people think of arguments, they think of doing a verbal fight against another person and also winning that, when it's actually the opposite. What an argument is supposed to be is the communication of ideas being passed through two different people to gain perspective. And that, I believe that's what we've been able to lose at this moment. So what I wanted to ask you is, how have you been able to gain perspective on other people's opinions through a quote unquote real argument?
I think it's a question. I think it's a conversation about values, right? And when I say values, I don't mean like, trustworthy and like I was a Boy Scout. So the ones coming to mind are trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, like all those are values for sure. Right. But I mean, like, so in business, you talk about a lot about negotiation. When you're a business and you're negotiating with a supplier, let's say you manufacture widgets, and in order to make a widget, you need to buy a certain, material from a supplier. You're going to negotiate the price of that, right? And when you negotiate in business, it's something we do every day in the private sector. When you negotiate, your first job is to figure out the value that's driving the other person's behavior, right? And it's not like you're a good person, they're a bad person. It's like, what is their optimal outcome and what's your optimal outcome? And so then where you're starting in the conversation, you understand their perspective, and you're able to navigate to the common ground much more easily. Right. It's like if you're scheduling, I don't know, do kids go to the mall anymore? You guys don't.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. It's mostly more of a fun activity get together
Yeah.
thing. It's less of a go and grocery shop thing. So
Right, right. Okay. So let's say you're scheduling with a couple of your friends to go hang at the mall for an evening, right?
yeah.
And you say, "Hey, over the next 3 nights, I'm free Wednesday night. I'm out of town Thursday night with my family, and I'm free Friday night," right? And then you
Mhm.
have one other friend who says, "Well, I already have like this thing with my parents on Friday night." So their value is that they can't do Friday, but they're
Yeah.
open the other 2 days. Your value is that you can't do, I can't remember, Wednesday, but you can do Thursday, Friday, right? And
Yeah.
that's, having that conversation initially about where you're standing and where they're standing, what you can and cannot do from your perspective, and what they can and cannot do from their perspective allows you to figure out which night actually works. That's the same thing we do in business negotiations, and it's got to be the same thing we do in political discussions too.
Yeah.
You know, because then once you know what's driving their behavior, then you can open up the conversation to all the possibilities that you can agree on, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of the conversation I think that's missing right now.
Mhm. And kind of going back a little, you said finding a common ground in an argument. And I feel like with teenagers, they kind of just jump to conclusions and start attacking and whatever. So how important would you say it for at least teenagers is it for them to kind of find that common ground before they jump to conclusions?
Oh, I mean, I think teenagers, and this isn't really even specific to teenagers, but I think some of us stop being open to learning, right? And I remember when I was a teenager, the temptation was to think like, I know all of this, right? I don't need to learn anything from who I'm talking to. And as adults, the temptation just gets worse because
Yeah.
we've been around the block a couple times, like we think we've researched all the policies, and so we just stop being open to learning. And and so that's a really damaging mistake, because then if you feel like you know everything, then you stop listening. If you stop listening, then you stop being able to even understand the perspective of the people you're talking to.
Right.
So we got to be open to learning, even if you feel like, hey, like, and right now I'm talking about, um, gosh, I mean, we talk about cutting spending, for example, and I think I know the right way to cut spending, but the second that I think I have all the answers is the second that I start making mistakes, because you got to be open to learning about the best way to cut spending, or the best way to change a law.
Right. And another thing I wanted to ask is, you love to be a problem solver, right?
Trying
So
to.
yeah. One thing that my mom likes to tell to us whenever we run into a difficult situation that has a problem, she tells us there's no such thing as an unsolvable problem. There is always solutions. It's always up to you to find that solution. So my question to you is, how have you been able, through difficult tasks and jobs, been able to find solutions through your work?
I love that question, Ivan.
Yes.
Ivan. I love the question, Ivan, and here's why. Because and I don't know, what political party you guys feel like you belong to, if any, but as a Republican, I'm a Republican, and a lot of times we get the reputation for just kind of being the party that's like the stick in the mud, no fun, can't do anything, says no all the time, right? But we don't fill in the blank with any solutions. So our society still has real problems, and those problems need to be solved. And as a Republican, sometimes we say, well, we don't believe in spending money to solve those problems, and then we just leave it at that. We say, nope, not going to spend money on solving, how to feed the poor families in our communities, right? We say, no, we're not going to do a government program, but then we don't fill in the blank with any other solution. And that's a big problem, I think, in my party that I want to solve, because solutions are still needed. And so to answer your question, you got to be creative, think outside of the box, and be willing to brainstorm with the other side of the aisle on how to solve the problem, even if it's not in this specific way. And I'll give you an example of something that we do every day in my campaign. We have so we've kind of become the campaign of homemade wheat bread.
Mhm.
And what that means is that my family's about to disown me, because we've in the last 2 months we've baked across the family, I think, like 2,000 loaves of homemade bread.
Wow.
And this is so, and I have a large family, so they're all, but still, like, all of my brothers and sisters, they'll say, like, on a bake day they bake like 150 or 200 loaves of bread, and then we drop it off to voters or delegates, or we slice it up at our events, and we have bread everywhere. We've got bread coming out of our ears. And the reason we have the campaign of homemade bread is because when I was little, my parents knew that you've got to be creative to solve a problem.
Mhm.
And they didn't have money, for example, to pay for piano lessons for me, but they knew that they wanted me to be able, not just me, but me and my siblings, they knew that they wanted us to be able to read music. They wanted us to be able to play the piano. And so they wanted us to have lessons, but they couldn't afford it. So they said, no, we can't pay for piano lessons. That's the first part. But rather than just leaving it, they said, but let's brainstorm a creative solution. And my mom said, you know what I can do is I can bake homemade bread. And so every week, every Saturday, for like the 3 years that I had piano lessons and the 3 years that all of my siblings had piano lessons, she would bake 5 loaves of homemade wheat bread, and we'd give it to the piano teacher as payment for the lessons. Same thing when my cat got hit by not mine. I don't like cats, actually. I like dogs. But my sister's cat got hit by a car,
Mhm.
and her name was Patches, and the cat's name, not my sister's name. And when Patches got hit by a car, the vet told us that surgery was going to be like, I don't know, to help her walk again, was going to be like $5,000 or something. And my parents didn't have that kind of money.
Yeah.
So they said, no, we can't go into debt. We can't spend the money, right? That's the first part. But then they got creative, and my mom called around all of Ogden where we lived and found a vet that was going to take homemade wheat bread in payment for this surgery.
Mhm.
And so the vet did the surgery on Patches. Patches got better. And for like 2 years, my mom baked every single week homemade wheat bread to pay for that surgery. So that's the type of creativity that we need in government right now. We
Yeah.
can't just, I mean, we have $30 trillion of debt as a country. That's a huge, huge, like mountain of debt. And that's not the right way to do things. And it may not be that we have the money to spend on all of these problems, but that doesn't mean that we can't be creative together to find a solution like homemade wheat bread, to solve some of the problems that our country faces. So we have bread everywhere we go because we believe in creative solutions.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you also said before that you were a Boy Scout.
I am. Yep. Eagle Scout. Do you guys do Boy Scouts? I guess now it's Scouts. I guess
Yeah.
Armani, you could do it too now.
Yeah. So yeah, both me and my brother did do Boy Scouts and Eagle Scouts as well. But yeah, something happened with our tribe, so it kind of got a little dismembered. But yeah, we did do that. So my question is to you: during your time at Boy Scouts, we obviously are able to learn a lot of skills in nature that can apply to our lives and so on and so forth. So what I wanted to ask you, what are some skills that you've been able to develop from Boy Scouts?
Well, I never really learned how to swim very well. So that's one that I wish I think I have the swimming. No. I got the cycling merit badge because I wasn't a very good swimmer. I think you could choose between like biking and swimming and maybe hiking or something.
Yeah.
So I wish I was a better swimmer, but I did learn to love cycling. In fact, when I taught at a Boy Scout camp for a whole summer at Bear Lake. Have you guys ever been up to Bear Lake?
Yeah.
And it's like 58 miles around the lake, and I would bike that twice a week, 58 miles. So I was biking over 100 miles a week, teaching cycling up at Boy Scout camp. I love getting out in nature and cycling.
Yeah.
Probably one of the biggest lessons of Boy Scouts for me was trusting myself to accomplish big things. And, I think about like the Eagle Project, for example, is a service project that you are supposed to plan and execute and lead all the way through. And we kind of bit off a big chunk, my parents were helping me and everything, of course, but we decided to redo all of the trails at like the Ogden Nature Center. with
Mhm.
wood chips and like ground covers and everything. And so I think I was like, I don't know, 14 or 15 at the time. And I was calling construction companies and asking them if they would donate a dump truck. And then I was calling nurseries and asking them if they would donate like ground covering. And
Mhm.
then we got like 30 volunteers there. And, you know, over the course of, I think, 2 Saturdays, oh, I must have been 16 because someone in my community loaned me his pickup truck and trailer. And I was
Mhm.
like, I've never driven a truck or a trailer before. And he's like, well, you got to learn, you know.
Mhm.
And he just kind of expected me and helped me learn how to back up a trailer with a pickup truck to be able to take the materials and stuff. And the whole thing taught me like sometimes we just get comfortable where we are and we forget what we're capable of. And in the scheme of things, recovering a couple trails at the Ogden Nature Center is not a huge thing. But it did teach me that, you know, if we put our mind to something, there's generally a way to make it work. And we're pretty capable people, all of us, if we set big goals and we trust ourselves and we, you know, we put our mind to something. And I
Mhm.
really love that about Boy Scouts specifically. It taught me that. And I've seen that over and over again in my own life, even auditioning for the Tabernacle Choir. It's like it's like 6 months of like theory tests and like sight reading, and you get called back to do all this stuff that's well beyond my comfort zone. But you know what? If I'm not gonna, if I don't try, the answer's already no, right? So you got to
Yeah.
try, and I think all of us are pretty capable if we put our mind to something. Oh, I think your mic just gave out. I can't hear you anymore. Did it come unplugged or anything?
Possibly.
Oh, I can hear you again.
Oh. Okay. How's that?
That's great. Yep.
Now we can hear him.
Hello?
I can hear you.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, you're
But
fine.
anyways, so my question to you was, growing up, you obviously worked many jobs. So would you say any of those jobs that you worked, did they ever correspond to like what you are today?
Hmm. I think I learned skills in every job that helped me in some way.
Mhm.
But also, when you grow up, I think, like, at least my view of what's possible to do in a career was very limited. It's like when you're in second grade, you think that all of the careers in the world are either like teacher, fireman,
Yeah.
like doctor, and astronaut, you know?
Yeah.
And then in high school, you understand that the business world exists. Maybe you understand politics exists. You understand that biology and science exist.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you're growing your understanding of what you want to do or what you could do. But
Mhm.
even then, like even within business, there are, I mean, not right now, I guess I'm running full time, but when I was at Google or Goldman, like that's a company of over 100,000 employees.
Mhm.
And and every single employee is doing something so obscure,
Mhm.
because you know that you would never grow up thinking this is what I want to do, but it's a critical part of how business is run. And so you kind of learn as you go along what you want to do and where you want to focus and all of those things. But every job I had taught me something. I worked making pizza like 1 year in high school at Pier
Oh.
49 Pizza, and we used to get slammed.
Oh.
Do you like Pier 49?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that sourdough pizza. I love it. We used to get slammed, and so like it taught me efficiency. Like I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and I used to make every pizza this work of art, but then people would be waiting in line, you know. So you got to like move people through and get the pizzas in the oven and get them made. And it may not be perfect, but you try and do your best.
Mhm.
And that taught me efficiency. Um, Picking corn taught me that like, I mean, some things just suck, but they've got to get done. You know, and there's a part of every job that you're going to hate, and there's a part of every job probably that you'll like, and you got to kind of be willing to take the bad with the good and just kind of suck it up and get the hard work done. Picking corn, it was like you had to wear these long sleeves. The heat of summer, you had to wear long sleeves because when you're walking through thick rows of corn, you get sliced up by the ears, you know, by the
Yeah. Mhm.
and so it was like a sweaty business, and you know, and thankless and long hours, but you know what? It's got to get done so that people can feed their families and corn can get sold and all of those things.
Yeah.
Gosh, what else have I done? I don't know. I think every job teaches you like long hours. At another one, I drove shuttles at BYU for like the women's volleyball team and like women's conference and stuff like that. And it was long hours because you follow the team around and you wait and then you know, drive them home. And so you have to, some jobs require you to put your own life on hold a little bit and carve out time so that you can't do all of the things with your friends that you wanted to do. And that's okay. There are seasons where you're going to work more and seasons where you're going to work less. But I think the skills that you develop in all of these jobs are more important than maybe even the actual topic or like subject matter. Because then once your worldview has grown and you're in college, for example, or you get out of high school and you know what you want to do, then you've developed all of the separate skills that are going to make you successful through a variety of random jobs.
So like you said, you were like involved in politics. And so I feel like when you're involved in politics, you're like going out of your comfort zone a lot. So I was just wondering why it would be good for someone to like go out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, comfort zone. You're right. I'm out of my comfort zone every single day. And like, I thought that was done when I like graduated high school. I thought, well, I'm pretty confident now. I'm doing pretty much anything. And that's not true.
Yeah.
You know, I spend all day long outside of my comfort zone, and I actually love. So, I mean, it is uncomfortable, but I'm a huge fan of breaking out of your comfort zone. What I didn't know as a teenager is that it's like for the first 18 to 25 years of your life, you're expanding your world, and then for like the last 60 years of your life, it seems like your world shrinks to your comfort zone. And, you know, and that's like career wise, maybe you know, pick a job and you stay there, which is fine. I don't have anything against any of this, right? Or you stay in the same town, or you stay with the same group of friends, or you stay, you know, like everything shrinks. And I think that it happens automatically. And I one thing that I really love about doing politics is that it's forced me to break through that comfort zone that I have kind of built for myself over time. And I think we've all got to figure out a way to do that, because that's the only way you keep growing, and that's the only way really you keep progressing as a person. So I'm a big fan of comfort zone stretching and comfort zone breaking. I think part of that is like setting big goals and then doing your best to meet them. I remember when I was in Vocal Point, and I had never been a singer or a performer. I was in choirs and stuff, but I'd never been a performer before Vocal Point. And I landed this solo. It was like a big solo, and it was part of our competition set. And we had like quarterfinals where we competed against 20 schools in Oregon. And I was supposed to be a soloist, and I was like, I am so uncomfortable doing this. And I didn't know how to dance, and I looked really awkward on stage. And I was like, and someone was like, set a goal and then achieve the goal. And I set a goal I was like, I'm going to learn how to dance. I'm going to learn how to sing. I'm going to learn how to like own my solo on stage. And I set that goal, and I put it into work, and of course all of that. And I won first place out of like 100 soloists in Oregon. And it taught me, like, if you set the goal, like, I'm not the best dancer. I mean, gosh, there was a whole blog dedicated to how awkward I looked, like, you know, on stage in Vocal Point. I'm not the best dancer, but if I set a goal and I try, I'm going to get more, you know, than I ever would have otherwise. And we went to semifinals after that in LA. I won first place with the same solo again. And then we went to the international championship was in New York City. And it was like the top 20 schools in the world. And I won best soloist there too. And it was all because of that initial goal that I set to not cave to the discomfort and the anxiety, and to just like push myself a little bit more than I was comfortable with to own my solo. And that taught me a huge lesson about breaking out of that comfort zone so that you can achieve a little bit more.
Yeah.
So we're gonna move on to our very last question, and on the podcast, it's usually known as the big question. Are you ready?
I don't know. We'll see.
All right. So our big question to you is, what advice would you give to people of the younger generation?
Just general advice.
Yeah.
I would say number one, we've talked about all of these a little bit. Number one, set big goals, right? Don't be afraid to dream big. And I think young people are really good at that. And so I love that about, when I talk to people, like, I mean, gosh, even starting a podcast, like, I love that. That shows you're thinking big, dreaming big, setting goals.
Yeah.
The second one is, I would say, don't be afraid of putting in hard work. I learned that, my first jobs on the farm. Life is made of hard work, and if you're not afraid of it, and you can learn to embrace it, you can pretty much do whatever you set your mind to. And the third one I would say is learn to trust yourself and your own voice. And that's taken me some time, even as a politician. I mean, I'm not really a politician, but a candidate, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm brand new at this whole thing, and it's uncomfortable for me to think that what I think in my head has enough value for me to actually say it out loud and then say it confidently, right? So I'm still really learning to trust myself and my voice. But I think if you can set big goals, you're not afraid of putting in work to get there, and you can learn to trust your own voice and yourself, and accept and embrace the fact that you have something unique and wonderful to offer the world. Those three things, I think, make all the difference in your work that you choose to do, in even the life that you craft for yourselves outside of work, the hobbies that you pursue, the fulfillment that you get out of life. I would say those three things, they're not everything, but I think they're a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to meet with us. It was so awesome to have you on the podcast.
You guys are rock stars. I hope you know that. This is the coolest thing ever. So kudos to you for getting this podcast started. I hope it goes really well for you. Thanks for having me on. I feel like very honored.
Yeah.
And I hope you'll add me to your subscriber list or something. I guess I can do that myself. See, I'm catching up on like how to do all the tech stuff. Hey, thank you guys. Great to meet you.
All right. That's all we have for you guys on the Three Peaks podcast. We'll see you guys on the trail next time.